I figured out what the root was behind that.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. Thank you for returning to hear the second part of Shelly's story. If you missed part 1, hit pause and check out episode 58. So as a refresher, Shelly Edwards Jorgensen attended Brigham Young University, where she was the first female to graduate with a degree in manufacturing engineering. After graduation, she moved back to her home state of Michigan and landed her dream job as a manufacturing engineer, starting off her 20-plus year career for the Ford Motor Company. A few years into her engineering career, she decided to go back to school to get her MBA. Shelly has spent over 30 years serving within her church congregation and community. She has always enjoyed serving others. She also enjoys woodworking and has amassed a workshop of her dreams. She enjoys being outside in the fresh air, trail riding on her ATV, and enjoying the Great Lakes, boating, and jet skiing. Shelly is happily married to her husband, Glenn, and is a stepmother, grandmother, and adored aunt. But before we hear the conclusion to Shelly's story, here is a review from Lauren Burns of the Redeemed podcast. Inspired. This is a fantastic podcast. Heather is encouraging and her guests are inspiring. Heather asks good, hard questions that make you think. She finds a way to bring hope in difficult situations. Must listen. Thank you so much, Lauren, for this fantastic review and for introducing me to Shelly. As I mentioned in a couple other episodes, I don't pick the reviews to read. I just go with the next one in order. And that was this one. And Lauren introduced me to our guest from last week and today, Shelly, and I'm so appreciative. And I would encourage everyone to go check out Lauren's Redeemed podcast, as well as the 2 episodes she did on this podcast, which are numbers 33 and 34. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Your comments and your star ratings help people find the Warrior Words podcast, and it really only takes a minute of your time. So, and you can also share those episodes. Doesn't matter what platform you're on, share the episodes as a whole, or share a specific episode that you think someone might like to hear or maybe needs to hear. Every time you share, every time you review, comment, they all are ways to expand the reach of the podcast, and so more people can listen in. And I invite you to join the Warrior Words Facebook community for inspirational stories, lessons learned, and beauty bombs. Go to Facebook. Facebook.com/groups/warrior words and request to join. A couple questions pop up afterwards and just answer those. And I will look forward to getting to know you in that group. So grab a tissue and join Shelly and me as we share the conclusion of this 2-part series, but not the conclusion of her journey. Let's rock. Welcome back to the podcast, Shelly, for part 2. Good to see you again.
Thanks. Great to see you too. It's been great talking to you, and I'm just happy to be back.
Well, we're looking forward to the rest of your story. And just to remind everyone, there is a part 1 to this episode. So if you have not heard that, go back to last week's episode. And so today we're going to pick up with Shelly recounting how she felt and what actually happened when she realized she was in the prosecutor's office.
They put me on the stand. I'm a basket case. I can't even answer the basic questions. I was a basket case because I knew what was coming. The judge is yelling at me to speak up, and I'm wadding up this piece of paper. My dad's glaring at me from across the room, and because I'm sure he doesn't know, but he does know what they're going to ask me.
Mhm. Right.
And but he doesn't know how I'm going to answer. And so because I'm struggling so badly, the judge dismisses the jury and calls a recess to let them leave, then have me continue where they're just going to get the recording of my testimony to make it easier. Well, if they would have made him leave, it would have been a lot easier, but they can't.
Yeah, no.
So now the hard questions start. And I'm giving answers like I told you. It was the summer of 1976. And I know it was the summer of 1976 because this was the car, these were the pajamas, this was the temperature, blah, 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 blah. I give them all of these details. I do that for all these stories that I'm recanting of these threats. But the one about I'm going to kill you and burn the house down, that's pretty parallel to exactly what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm sitting there and I know I have to go home with him. I have to go home with him, and they're making me say these things. I'm terrified. And so they call and they ask me all these questions, and then they're going to be wrapping up my testimony. I mean, I was on the stand for hours. And they call another recess to bring the jury back for the ending of my testimony. And this recess was going to be a little longer, so I had enough time to go to the cafeteria and try to get a drink. So I'm down there and I had some of my girlfriends came with me, and my mom's sister, my Aunt Kathy, she was at every day. And my I'm down there getting a drink, and next thing you know, here comes my dad. And this was like the most unexpected response is he hugs me and says, "Just say what you have to say." I'm again baffled. And I'm thinking, is he just putting on a show and he's gonna like murder me when I get home? But I figured out what the root was behind that is because he was delayed in coming to the cafeteria. And when I didn't know this until I went back to the courthouse and got the transcripts, is every single piece of those damning stories, every single one of them that the jury didn't hear, they never heard, because they had a sidebar during that recess that the defense attorneys got them thrown out under the guise that I couldn't say it was July 27th, 1976. Now, mind you, this is 1988, and I'm recanting a story from 1976 as a 6-year-old, and they're going to dismiss it as being true and factual because I couldn't tell you the date.
But you could tell them the car.
I could tell them the car. I could tell them that it was summer in the year and every other circumstance around it. But because I couldn't say it happened on Christmas Day or, a specific date, every single one of those stories that I gave that level of detail about, It was that specific about how I knew what age I was, what year it was, what season it was, but because I couldn't bring it down to a date, a single day. Now you tell me, think of any fight you had with your ex-husband. Can you put a date on that wasn't a holiday?
Probably not, other than the final ones, perhaps.
Right, right.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, um, so yeah, all of those got thrown out and he knew it. So, so he ended up getting convicted of second-degree murder and arson, but his sentence was 13 years and 7 to be served concurrently.
Shelly, thank you. Thank you for sharing that incredible journey and everything that you went through. I know that you've done it a few times now, so but still, it can't be easy to continue to share it. So I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to continue to share it. But now we're going to move forward a little bit into your adulthood and how you started healing from all of this. Because as you mentioned, the trial happened when you were 17, so you were still a minor. Um, and now you have to grow up as an adult with your mother gone and basically your father gone. You mentioned, you are now orphaned. So let's talk a little bit about how that healing process started and what you did.
Well, thanks for asking that because honestly, for me, that's the most important thing. That's why I'm even talking. That's why I even wrote the book, because it took me a very long time to figure out how to go from praying to die every day to being happy and whole. And that's the value in knowing my story is not to be overwhelmed with the trauma,
Mhm.
because when I say this is a fraction, what I've shared is a fraction of what I've experienced. And the experiences didn't end there. They continued. They've even still continued. I mean, I talk about some of them in the book, but literally, this is a fraction of what I've been through. And all I see that is its credibility to the possibility of healing for everybody.
Right.
And so that's why I share my story, besides the fact that I was asked by my mother and God, really, that is part of my story. I shared the other day or last week about how all these traumas and tragedies happened
Mhm.
in my life, but I had miracles too. I mean, literal miracles happening at the same time. The same time we're at Linda's house and I'm miserable. Um, my mother's appearing to me 3 different times.
Wow.
My mother never missed a thing in my life. I was a 3 sport athlete. My very first basketball game back after her funeral, I was at an opponent's gym, so it wasn't even home court. It wasn't my normal setting. I'm stealing the ball right before halftime. I I'm on a breakaway and I hear my mother cheering. I hear her voice.
Wow.
I look into the stands, and as soon as I look into the stands, I see her and I feel her. I feel her. And so I'm stunned. I'm 15. Okay. I just been through the worst 2 weeks of my life.
Mhm.
And the ball's bouncing off because of course I missed the layup. And as the ball's bouncing off, I get I get this just sense of peace, the feeling of my mom's spirit and warmth. And her voice is, Shelly, I love you and everything will be okay.
Wow. Got chills.
And then and then she was gone.
Wow.
I go into the locker room, I'm thinking I'm losing my mind. Um, I'm certainly not telling anybody about this.
Mm.
And so then a few weeks go by. well, more than a few weeks. And now it's right after Thanksgiving. It's the beginning of December. I'm going to the house, being terrorized every single time I have to go over there. I'm having reoccurring nightmares. Everything is horrible. It's Christmas. I'm at the biggest mall in the area. I don't even know why I was by myself at this particular moment. By walking past Baker Shoes, which was my mom's favorite store because she loved shoes and handbags, and Baker's always had sales. So I'm walking past Baker Shoes, and I look, and I swear I saw my mom inside Baker Shoes. So I have to run around this bench in a planter, and I get inside Baker Shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is she not in there, there's nobody in there. The workers were in the back, and I'm like, oh, I hope no one saw me like jumping over crap to get in here. So I'm walking out, and again, this feeling of warmth and sensation, the Holy Ghost washed over me. My mother's voice, Shelly, I love you, and everything will be okay. And then she was gone. And I'm like, okay, well, that's twice. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'm not losing my mind because now it's two different times.
Right.
And so fast forward, I I am laying in my bed at night. Everything, like I said, is just getting worse and worse. I blew my back out. I had to miss volleyball, which is one of my only outlets. Blah blah blah. Everything is getting worse and worse and worse, and I'm just miserable, wanting to die, really. And I'm laying in my bed, and I'm not sleeping at this point either, not able to hardly sleep.
Right.
And I'm laying on my left side with my back towards the door, and all of a sudden, my room starts lighting up. So I'm thinking, oh, Lisa or my dad opened the door. So I roll over, but no, there's my mom lighting the room. I'm feeling her. I'm seeing her. And again, the message, Shelly, I love you and everything will be okay. Now, it was decades from those messages before anything was okay. I put on a happy face because that's what I do, and that's what I was trained to do. But, that I was 15. Now let's fast forward. I'm 35. I just graduate summa cum laude with my MBA. I have my dream job at Ford, and I'm actually keep getting promoted almost every other year of my career. I started out as an engineer. I was an orphan. I was homeless at one point, um, right after my freshman year of college. And um, and I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree. I own my own home at this point. I'm making over six figures. This is the early 2000s. So I'm doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And on paper, you're thinking, well, on paper, everything's well, but I'm praying to die every day. But not even my best friend who lives with me knows this. And
Same pattern as what you described in your domestic violence situation, not telling people things, not sharing things, and putting on that facade. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I had done talk therapy on and off for like 15 years at this point, because the first time I talked to somebody, I was a freshman at college. It was after my freshman year. And so, but I was miserable. And so two things happened. And the two things that happened were, number one, I found the right trauma therapy. Because therapy is not a one size fits all. And there's many modalities. And I learned that for me, I needed outside the box, the things that I thought was hocus pocus. And so I tried I found a therapist that was like a unicorn. So I tried EMDR. I was too numb for the EMDR. Didn't work for me. But then I did neuro-emotional technique, which is still not mainstream or hardly known, but that technique saved my life. And I was in intensive ENT, ENT therapy for like 2.5 years. I was going actually twice a week because my therapist that introduced me to it didn't take my insurance, but she knew somebody who did this that did. And she's like, oh, well, you can go see her, because that you're benefiting from this. And so I just did both instead.
Okay.
So I so I went from praying to die every day to happy and whole. But the trauma therapy, finding the right trauma therapy is only step one. The most important thing I did was learning how to apply the atonement. And what that means to me is, first of all, there's a few hurdles that I think most people have is, number one, believing that healing is even possible after things.
Yes.
Hence, that's why I tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's why I tell my story. And so that's true for everyone. Healing is possible. There's always a path to healing. Number two hurdle is believing you're worth it.
Yes.
Believing that you deserve it. Because trauma sabotages your self-worth, especially sexual abuse or domestic violence. The things of these nature really just destroy your self-worth. And so once you get past those two things and you can see a witness like me and you say healing is possible, that gives you an inkling of hope with step one. And then step two is up to you to look inside and say, no, I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be whole. And so I can't help you with that other than say, if any thought in your head is telling you you're not, that's a lie.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
but the third and the key step was I read this book. It's called Believing Christ. And there's a small little bit of commentary in it where the author talks about, we all Christians believe in Christ. We believe he exists. We believe he performed miracles. We believe he did this and he did this. We believe he was crucified for our sins and that we can be forgiven for our sins. But we lack the complete and total understanding of the atonement, that Gethsemane and that suffering wasn't just to pay the price for sins. It was to give the atonement the power to heal you. So heal us from all things that we endure in life. And we're asked to yoke ourselves that our burdens may be light. And so that's an invitation to learn how to let him carry us through these things until we can learn the lessons that are there. Because that is what I've learned, is that all adversity is an opportunity for growth. So it's actually a gift. We cannot obtain the Christ-like characteristics that are the purpose of life: empathy, humility, patience, endurance, long-suffering, compassion, understanding, all the way until the sum of all those characteristics culminate in Christ-like charity, which is the love of God for all man, or all of God's creations. Mm-hmm. You cannot achieve charity unless you've developed all these other stepping stone characteristics. Well, shoot, long suffering alone by definition is suffering long. So
Yeah.
there's no other way to learn any of these things. And so the third thing that is the most important is believing Christ, which means you know that God has a plan for you as an individual. He's your father. He loves you. And, that's a hard concept for me. I had a father that didn't exactly give me the best things
Right. Right.
and didn't have my best interests in mind. But I decided, okay, I am going to put 100% of my trust in God's plan for me. And, and, and that doesn't mean 99.999%. It means 100%. And, and because the only thing that we have to give back to God is our own will. And free will was actually a gift to begin with. So,
Yes, it is.
so that's all we have to offer. And if we trust in his plan, we understand that adversity is actually necessary for us to actually achieve what the goal of this life is, which is to learn and grow and to develop these characteristics, then we recognize that it is part of the plan. And everything happens for that reason. Now, it doesn't mean that God is an advocate of abuse. He just knows that the adversary is going to create the environment that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the other thing that I learned about it was that there's a lot more equality than in adversity than we think there is, because we're all born as individuals. We have different strengths and weaknesses. I'm an author of this book. It's almost 400 pages. I'm dyslexic.
Wow.
And I'm an engineer. So I write in bullet points. And that is not something I wanted to do or even desired to do. And so I had to a friend of mine helped me write this, because this is not in I can write, but I can't write something that's going to be an award-winning book like this one is for writing. And because that's not one of my gifts.
And it's a
But
different style of writing from your engineering background. Yes.
yeah, and but I could build the house I'm sitting in by myself, design it, build it, whatever. And other people don't have that skill. So we're all born with different strengths and weaknesses. There, and so again, logic, if the goal is for all of us to learn these same characteristics, and the only way that we're going to push ourselves into the knowledge of these things is to be brought to our breaking points. The only difference in adversity is where our breaking point is and how we get there. So if my breaking point was my mother being murdered, and I'm going to trivialize this grossly just to make a point.
Okay.
And a friend's breaking point is they don't know what to wear to prom. It doesn't matter how we arrived at our breaking point. The pain and the consequences of the next choice is the same, because you're learning whatever. Is it patience? Is it disappointment? Is it you're learning? You have to look to what the lesson is. Now, the knee-jerk reaction and the natural reaction is, why? Why is this happening? So what did I learn? Okay, that is the adversary's tool. Fine, we can ask that question at the beginning and just be like, really? And I still do this, okay?
Yeah, I do too.
I still do it. And even though I've 20 years ago learned this lesson, it's fine to be like, really? And ask the question and then move on. because if you're asking the why question, you're just circling. If you keep asking the why question, it's the feeling sorry, the self-pity. It's circling the drain, and all it does is lead to depression and misery. And that's what the adversary wants you to focus on, is that you are a victim, and there's, why me, why me? This is not fair. This is not fair. This is not fair. And circle the drain, circle the drain, circle the drain. Once you can stop that self-defeating behavior and start recognizing that, the answer to why 100% of the time is because I need to learn something. Now, I might learn it in an hour. I might learn it in a week, a month, a year, a decade, a lifetime. You can't put an expectation on when the learning is going to end, because it won't end.
No, that's one of those guarantees in life, right? Keep
But
learning.
you can learn from that same adversity. I'm still learning. I'm still learning from my mother's murder. Now, I learned something that was valuable and closed the book at that time.
Mhm.
And then I've now in retrospect learned more and more and more, but I'm not still suffering from it.
Right.
And once you get done with your why me question, which should be quick, the quicker you do it, the better it is for you,
Mhm.
is start focusing on the questions of what and how. What should I be learning? What can I be learning? And what can I do to use that knowledge to help myself and others?
And others, yes.
Because life is a team sport, and we're here to help each other. That's why you're doing this podcast. That's why I'm doing this podcast. And and it's not a competition.
No.
So when you have these mind shifts and really step back and look at what the purpose of life is, it is to learn and grow. And you need opposition to do that. You need adversity to do that. Even the laws of physics will teach you that there has to be equal and opposite forces. And just to be sitting in this chair, there's an opposite force, So to drive your car, anything that, it's a law of physics. So God works within those laws too. It's the
Mhm.
same thing with our progress. It's just spiritual in nature, not physical in nature.
And I think that's a really good point, because I think that can help people to understand, because we all learn differently. Some people are more visual and some people are more tactile, and but those are just two examples. Um, but to have that image of the equal and opposite reaction in both a physical nature, like we learn in physics, as well as in a spiritual nature, that is how we grow and how we learn. And I think that's an excellent point to illustrate that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So you showed us your beautiful book. Um, and I know there was a little difficulty with that. You mentioned being dyslexic. Um,
Yeah.
so if you could maybe just give us a brief, I know it's hard, but you
Yeah.
know, how it came to be, how you came to hold this beautiful Ashes memoir in your hands.
Well, yeah, so it was a long journey. It really did take 9 years from start to finish. I contemplated it a long time. I told you I was asked by my mother, which was another one of those experiences. I've had many of them at this point. Most of them I don't even talk about in the book. Some more than the three that I shared, I do. And I had, got promptings from God along the way. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess I got to do this. And so I knew that my skill set wasn't going to be enough. And I was praying about who I knew that could help me. And I asked my friend Becky, and she had never written a book before, but she's got her degree in English, and she just had she agreed. just had baby number 5.
Wow.
and then and then and then her husband got transferred to Thailand for a 3-year assignment. So that was part of the process. And then neither one of us knew a hill of beans of what we were doing. Started going to writing conferences and this and that, and
Mhm.
that's like drinking from a fire hose. And
Yes, it is. Yes.
so, um, so anyway, we got to a point, and Becky's like, Shelly, because our process would be, I would tell her the data points. She
Mhm.
would, I, I know Heather, she was greatly inspired and helped because she, you're a writer, so I'm giving her bullet points, and she's got to create the picture of what's happening around
Mhm.
me. Even in the opening scenes, I talk about how I went from the Zidels and I went and I hid under those bushes and I saw the body bag come out. Okay. I swear to you. So I tell her that much information. So she writes up that chapter, sends it back. This is a process. She would send it back to me. And now I'm reading about how I was sneaking through the garage. I hit my shin on the bike pedal and the leaves and this and this. I'm like, I did hit my shin on the bike pedal. How did she know I hit the shins on the bike pedal? And, I mean, I cannot even tell you how many times because she'll send it back to me. She's like, well, let me know which details I got wrong or which ones I forgot after, it would prompt
Mhm.
me to remember things. Again, I know it was inspired because there was so many details that she would be ad-libbing that were actually true. Now,
Wow.
I would correct the ones that weren't true, and I would correct the one that I remembered. If I remembered, and I was very specific. I I'm a little anal in the sense that I can't have things not be exactly how I remember. and and that's a little bit hard, especially when you go through the editing process. So there was some
Mhm.
things that had to kind of be bundled in a way. But this is 100%. Um, it was long. It was long because of that. But we got to this point where Becky's just like, Shelly, I need to know what you were thinking and feeling in these moments. I haven't had these experiences, so I can't imagine what they would be.
Right.
and
And
and so
you're writing in an engineering bullet point background, and those feelings and those all the sensory information is what's necessary to go into a book that a reader so the reader can get the full picture. Yeah.
yeah, and so I knew she was right. So what did I do? I call up Kathy, my therapist. I hadn't been in her office in years, and I'm like, Kathy, I need your help. And so I would bring my laptop, and Kathy would type as we reprocessed all this. So I went through
Wow.
everything again.
Wow.
And this time I'm using EMDR and some of the other techniques that did now
Mm.
work on me. And I had a angelic help through the process.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
discuss that in the book, but I did
Hmm.
many, 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 almost every time.
Wow.
So, um,
Well, you're
and
reminding me, I'm sorry, I just interrupted because a thought just came to me. You're reminding me of how, and I don't remember exactly where this is, but where it says, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And that's
mhm.
exactly what he did with Moses and so many others, Aaron. Uh, so many times, we think that when God calls us to do something, that we have to be perfectly able or perfectly ready to do it. And that's just not the case, because if we are ready and obedient, then he'll send the help.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yep. So, I mean, that's kind of the process that we went through. And and that's why it took 9 years. So there was heavenly help the entire way. Like I said, there's no way Becky would have known that I cracked my shins in the dark in that garage. But she put that on paper, and that is actually exactly what happened.
Wow.
And I mean that's the one that like kind of blew my mind away because that was like chapter one. And that wasn't always chapter one. We did rearrange the cadence based on one of the writing conferences, and we met with Jessica Strouser, who at the time she was working for Publishers Weekly, and she was at one of the conferences doing a free eval, and she suggested not doing a chronological timeline. You know, I was born at a young age, you know, that kind of thing. And so anyway, but when we got into the nitty-gritty details of it, we had it organized in the way that it is, because it starts the night of the fire, and then it flashes back to fill in history.
Well, I look forward to adding it to my bookshelf soon. So, well, adding it to my red bookshelf soon. I have a habit of collecting books that there's a few on there that I collected just because I liked the idea, and then I just haven't read them. So, but I'm definitely looking forward to reading how all of this unfolded and this 9 year process. You've had multiple journeys, and you've walked multiple paths of different things, and as you mentioned, the different adversities that you've experienced to learn each of these lessons, and they're not done.
No.
One might think, okay, well, you have this beautiful book and stack of books on your bookshelf behind you now, you're done. But you're not. As long as you're breathing,
No.
you're still learning, and there's still things to do. And I love the fact that you added helping others into that, because yes, you have to help yourself, and you have to heal, and you have to become that person that God wants you to be. But then you have to take it and use it for good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what I do this podcast for. We don't just stop at the trauma stories. We have to go through the healing and the thriving and what you're doing today, and because that's more important. It's more important. So with that, do you have any last minute, or maybe not last minute, that's not the right words, but any last warrior words that you would like to say directly to someone who's listening? We can't guarantee that everybody has, well, we can guarantee that nobody has exactly the same story that you have. And as you beautifully pointed out, there's that equity. It doesn't matter exactly what your situation is. So knowing that people are listening who have vastly different experiences, what would you say from your experience as a lesson or as some warrior words for our listeners?
Yeah, I guess I would say that again, back to there's equality in it. You know, I didn't even go into the fact that I became bedriddenly sick and then had to have a miracle healing. I mean, that happened after I was married. And so that's what I mean. And after I healed from all my mom's stuff, I was, 41, getting married for the first time, thinking I'm gonna ride off in the sunset. And it's like, nope, now it's time to end your career, make you bedridden, you can't eat, you can't, whatever. And so that's a whole nother part of the journey. So don't expect an ending. And one thing that I used to carry as shame, which was all of this that I talked about, I now recognize it. And I don't want to sound prideful, but it's it's the opposite. You should be feeling the opposite of shame. You should almost feel pride that you've been able to overcome, that you were pushed to that breaking point in this way, because, if you do line things up, there are things that are, harder to overcome that some people just wouldn't be able to handle. So what that means to a warrior is that you are a warrior. If you do look around and think, oh, well, this isn't fair, this isn't fair because this is so much harder than, picking out a prom dress. That is true. It is harder, but relative to you versus relative to them, it's the same. That's what I'm saying in the equality. So yeah, don't be ashamed of the traumatic things that you've been able to overcome, because that's a definition of your power and your strength and actually who you are. So yeah, it doesn't define you in a bad way. It defines you in the completely opposite way. So anytime the adversary, he always makes good bad and bad good. So your strength is should be part of your honor in being able to step forward and say, I not only survived this, with the Lord's help, I've overcome this, and now I'm here to be able to be his hands to help others. And that's the other thing. Again, anytime we're asked to do something by God, which is service,
Right.
we get more blessings in return. He never asks us to do anything that doesn't benefit us, ultimately. Now, you can't do things with the intent to get benefit,
Right.
but but I just doing all these podcasts and writing the book and speaking events. I do book clubs too, which I love to do the book clubs because everyone can read the book. They can ask me all the crazy questions and sidebar questions about the details of that. And then we can also talk more specifically about, well, how did you overcome this? Or how did you get to forgiveness? And how did, those are, I love doing the book club. So if anyone wants to do that, they can email me via my website or whatever and set that up. But it's through those experiences when I'm helping others that it's given me more purpose in all the pain. Because now I know that there's purpose in all of the suffering that I've experienced, because I'm able to use it for good.
And that's a great place to put an exclamation point. And you mentioned your website. Where can people come and find you? And I mean, I'm sure we're going to put a link to the book in the description. But where would you like people to come to get to know more about you?
Yeah, my website's beautifulashesmemoir.com, and there's links to all my social media and stuff on there. So it's probably easiest just to send you there. And if you want to email, and this is legit, I don't just say this. If somebody is struggling with something and you feel like reaching out to me, reach out to me. I will respond to you. And I honestly am only doing this to help people. I don't care about selling books. I I care about helping people. That is my mission and my goal. So if somebody needs to talk, I'm here.
That is beautiful. Perfect with the name of your book. So thank you. Thank you very much, Shelly. Thank you for giving us not only just sharing your journey, but, selflessly giving, a couple hours of your time and truly living out that helping others part. And I appreciate your time, your story, um, and this conversation. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Heather, and I hope that everything is successful with your podcast. I fully support what you're doing and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Shelly had so much to share in this two-part series, and I am incredibly grateful for her dedication to sharing her story to help others. She made a really important point. While it's important to share the trauma, the events of her life, we have to remember that it's not the whole story. If we ended the episode with her father's conviction, we would have done a disservice. That's not where her journey ends. Sure, she mentioned that as an adult, her life looked normal, whatever normal means, right? She had a good job, hobbies, her own home, her husband. But this was on the outside. It was a facade, a mask. She was still praying to die. She was praying for it to end. And death was the way she thought it would end. But as usual, God had different plans for Shelly than she had for herself. God would help her end the pain she was experiencing, but it would take time. It would take some manipulation through various therapies. It would take her becoming uncomfortable in other ways. But he would equip her. He intervened and provided heavenly help. And she became willing and obedient. And that's why part 2 of this series was not only important, but necessary. Shelly's willingness to get help and to continue seeking help when one modality or another didn't work. It led her to a place where she can now share her life, her experiences, and her lessons learned with others through her book, through podcast appearances, and speaking engagements. It's kind of like Jesus's crucifixion, his Via Dolorosa, way of the cross or sorrowful way. It was excruciatingly painful. He was abused, beaten, tortured, and left to hang on a tree until he died. And that was assumed to be the end, until it wasn't. Jesus rose from the dead. He died for our sins. But if we stop there, the story is incomplete. We need the resurrection. We need Jesus to redeem those sins that he paid the ultimate price for. So too, Shelly's story is incomplete when her father enters prison. She needed to keep going to learn what God needed her to learn in order to help others along their own sorrowful way. So my key takeaways from Shelly's story are that you can ask God why, and you can feel the feelings, but you can't stay there. It's okay and often necessary to seek therapy. The first therapy or a therapist or a modality you try may not work, and that's okay. Just keep trying. Don't stop before the healing. Just because a traumatic situation seems to be over, you need to process it, learn from it, and heal. Use your story of healing to help others. Some things to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up. Fight the good fight. Seek beauty. And make your words warrior words. God bless.